Hello and welcome to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner Up Is. First, a warning about the audio on this episode. Something went wrong with my microphone, so what you'll hear on my end basically sounds like I'm patching in by phone rather than my usual mic setup like this, which is pretty crystal clear. Apologies for that. Hopefully, it's not totally unlistenable, just, not up to my usual standards. So, now to the business at hand. On June 5th, 2019, I released the episode of And the Runner Up Is on the 1965 Best Picture race, where we discussed Dr. Zhivago as the likely runner up that lost Best Picture to The Sound of Music. But on second thought, what if the runner up was really Darling? Hello, and welcome back to On Second Thought, where we discuss another Best Picture nominee that we did not cover as the runner-up on the main show and discuss whether it may have actually been the runner-up. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, and we are revisiting 1965 today, where on the main show I said Dr. Zhivago was the runner-up to The Sound of Music, but today we are discussing if it actually could have been a different film, but still a film starring Julie Christie, and that movie is Darling. And my guest today is a great friend who has been on the main show and, bonus episodes a number of times, actually. You last heard her on the Best Actress series, talking the fourth Academy Awards in that Best Actress race, talking Marie Dressler, Marlene Dietrich, other people too. She's a podcaster for Untitled Cinema Gals, Community Rewatch podcast, a true podcasting queen. Welcome back to the show, Chelsea Eichholz. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me back. It is so nice to be back for such a hot girl movie. I have tried
Yes.
to turn your podcast into a hot girls podcast, and I think it's working.
Yeah, I mean, when I thought about who I thought would be good for a movie like Darling, a movie about a woman who's having various affairs and just doing whatever she wants in life, I immediately thought of you. So I hope you take that as a compliment.
I really do. Like, it's quite an honor. And when you offered me two things, I was like, well, deeply, I have to go with the hot girl one. The other
Me
one,
too.
it was just kind of boring for me. Would have
Right,
had nothing to say.
which is fair. Right. So very excited to have you on for this one. Shall we just jump right in?
Let's go for it. This is a
All
wild
right.
one.
Yes, lots to talk about. Okay, so Darling, it's a British drama about a young woman named Diana Scott, who is a young model and actress, or as we like to say in the reality TV world, a mactor. She's living in Britain. She's very hip and chic, and she's married to a guy named Tony, but she finds herself kind of bored and dissatisfied, so she chases this lifestyle that is fast paced and exciting, and she meets a guy named Robert, who's this TV interviewer guy who she falls in love with, and they have an affair, despite both of them being married and also him having kids. And they go to these hip parties, and eventually she meets another guy who's in the art world named Miles, and she loses interest in Robert and falls for Miles, and she's always kind of looking to see if she'll settle into a happy place, but she finds that she can't really get there. And then she ultimately has another affair with an Italian prince. So a lot of the film is sort of about her trying to find satisfaction, basically, and sort of struggling to do so. So the film was directed by John Schlesinger and written by Frederick Raphael. It stars Julie Christie as Diana. Lawrence Harvey, Dick Bulgard, Jose Luis de Villalonga, and Roland Curum as her hot gay best friend Malcolm. And Darling made $4.5 million at the box office. It was a hit, and it earned 5 Oscar nominations, winning 3, which I always forget that it actually won 3, but not Best Picture. Okay, so Chels, let's dive right in here. What do we think of Darling? I don't know how many times you've seen this, but what's your relationship to this film?
I have somehow seen this film more times than I think I have. Like in
Okay.
high school, that's when I was like really getting into like the Oscars and going back into film history. And I'm like, how in the world did this woman beat Julie Andrews for The Sound of Music? And then I
Hmm.
just watch it. And I'm like, oh, I get it now. And
Yeah.
and then just it's always randomly on TCM. It was just on there like last month or two for the Oscars. And I always just find myself putting it on in the background and watching it. So I don't know. This film, I said it earlier, you have to pay attention to it to really understand all of what it's doing, or
Mhm.
else it can kind of fall flat. It's not a good background movie like I've made it in my life, but I don't know, when I'm paying attention, it really hits hard and I love it.
Wow. Yeah, I think thinking about it like as a background movie is interesting because I feel like you can sort of go in and out of it and be like, oh, look, it's this sort of jet set lifestyle that we're following, and it's like, there's a certain aimlessness to it that maybe you wouldn't get the themes if you were just going in and out and having it as a background movie, but yes, once you do lean in, I think you do realize what the film is probably going for.
Yeah, like when you're just listening to it, you're just getting the voiceover and you're not seeing what the scenes actually are.
Right.
Because whenever it is like her having conversations with people, she's putting on this front, and you really have to actually be paying attention to like the context of the scene and her face and like who she's trying to manipulate.
Right.
And that's where the richness of the film comes from.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is an interesting film to me where the way I thought about this movie was like before this rewatch was basically just in the context of this being a star vehicle for Julie Christie, and it sort of felt aimless as a film from my
Mm-hmm.
memory, but that still that she gets so much to do and she was so big at this time between this
Mm-hmm.
and Dr. Zhivago. It sort of all revolves around her. So then when I went to go watch this again, I definitely had forgotten that there's more of a meaning to this film than I remembered. I mean, I remembered it being about her having affairs with a bunch of men and having this kind of hip relevance in the 60s, the kind of mod girl aesthetic. But I was actually really struck by like what this character of Diana is going through and how she's so unhappy with her life and she keeps sort of searching for meaning and really trying on all these different roles in a way of like, okay, I'm going to be a model. Now I'm going to be a wife. And now I'm going to go off with the bohemian crowd, free thinking and everything. And now I'm going to try to be religious for a little bit, and that doesn't really work out either. And
No.
maybe I'll be this single girl with my gay best friend, and we'll have a great time. And it's like she's chasing this high, but then it's like she always runs into that feeling of kind of like a displacement. Like she thinks, oh, this is the one thing that's going to finally make me happy. But then when that doesn't happen, it just makes her more depressed. And I think the film does a good job of sort of showing us how she keeps repeating this cycle of just uprooting her life over and over again, but then getting to that feeling of hopelessness and not really bashing you over the head with some kind of moral message about it necessarily. I mean, I do think we're supposed to get the feeling that like this whole lifestyle is kind of empty, certainly, but it's not super moral, I would say.
Yeah, I texted my co-host Morgan about it when I rewatched the film this morning. I'm like,
Hmm.
well, the first text was there's a direct pipeline between Julie Christie and this and Greta Gerwig and Mistress America, like the very selfish person
Yeah.
trying to chase something that ultimately does not exist. And like she always getting herself into weird situations and having to talk herself out of it, but
It's true.
it never judges her for anything. And
Yeah.
it's just like super radical. Like, again, we're going to bring it up, but like she has an abortion in this film.
Yep.
And it's like very shortly after, she's super excited. She likes the excitement and the attention of being pregnant. But then she like stops and thinks, oh no, I don't need a baby in my life. That'll derail everything.
Hmm.
And like the film doesn't judge her for having an abortion. And
Yeah.
Robert doesn't judge her and stuff. He just brings some flowers and like they just get on with their life and she goes and chases something else.
Right. And not to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think the ending really it kind of does leave you in an uneasy feeling that she still hasn't really found happiness, and maybe she might even be more miserable than ever, possibly, depending on your interpretation of her going on the plane and everything. But it's
Yeah,
this,
because boredom for her is like the worst possible
yes.
thing. And that's also just commentary on royalty that we're like
Mm,
the current moment is obsessed with, like today, that being a royal person actually sucks.
right.
And like it's so empty and meaningless. And I just love that she's a woman just fighting against all of that. But like, because there is a lot of truth to it, we're all just trying to fight against the boring ideal, what a woman should be.
Exactly. And there's definitely a realism to the film, I would say, and it feels very inspired by, French directors and just Italian, just like a very European feeling. Obviously, that's being a British film, that makes sense, but definitely something that you look at even some of the other films in the Best Picture race with more Hollywood type of endings than this. I think it sort of stands out, I would say, especially in the middle of the 60s. But I will also say that a big part of why maybe I found this rewatch, it sort of resonated with me so much, is that this year I've been rewatching Mad Men.
Oh
And
boy.
have you seen Mad Men?
I have seen Mad Men.
Okay.
You know what? This makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Okay.
I get it.
Just go with me here. Um, I think weirdly it pairs really nicely with this film in how like that's also a show that's about people that are trying on different identities and trying to find happiness, especially the Don Draper character, and experimenting with this new kind of culture in the 60s and also sort of hoping that if they can change this one thing, then maybe then they'll figure out their life and everything will fall into place. But it's like they just keep running into the same sort of problem as what Diana is going through here, which is that yes, sometimes change is a good thing and it's natural to try to find that sense of happiness when you feel like your current situation isn't really working out, but it's not gonna solve everything, you know? And that's
Yeah.
something that I've been thinking about a lot just from watching Mad Men again and sort of thinking about my own life. But I do think it's something that I would imagine a lot of people also had to confront in the 60s with all this sort of social change that's happening, not only in America, but in Britain, everywhere. So, yeah, it strikes me as a very zeitgeisty kind of film and very like set in a very specific time and place.
It does, and it's really cool to see how it resonates so much now
Mm,
because a lot of people like to this day it got like it has mixed reviews now, give
yeah.
or take, because people were like, "Oh no, it was just a blip and stuff. She was just the young starlet we all liked." Like there's some really middling reviews of this film,
Yep.
but just rewatching it and being like, "Oh no, there's a lot of deep truth to this."
Hmm.
And you see a lot of these truths in later Schlesinger films, like
Oh
Midnight
yeah.
Cowboy. You see like so many of the same themes popping up, and you're like, oh, this film walks so we could have a Midnight Cowboy that could run.
Yeah. Or Sunday Bloody Sunday, things like that. Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. And like we see in this film how there's like these on the street interviews talking to people about how things have changed and kind of become more liberal, and some people don't like that. And then we see other people who do feel liberated by that. So I feel like this is a film that really is resonant with that time period, but still does resonate in modern day because it's sort of about the feeling that none of us are really happy, which is like something that I certainly have felt and a lot of people I know have felt in current days. Just saying.
Yeah, and it again, we're just at one of those turning points, and at this point in the 60s, it was starting to be a real turning point in history and culture of people being like, we don't like this like family post World War II.
Right.
Guess we can call it the boomer upbringing that we're going through right now. We're not a fan of this like house and the picket fence because it's just boxing people into something.
Right.
And so it's a lot of people just trying to get out of this box. And some of them are just super comfortable in their little box. Like Robert, he was very happy, but then
Hmm.
he saw this tornado and he got swept up in it.
Yes, exactly. And I would say it's hard not to when you have Julie Christie, being
Oh my
on her
goodness.
hot girl shit. I mean, truly,
What
like,
truly the like she is a hot girl, but she has got like some, I won't say the proper term. She got some sad gal energy in there, and a lot of
yeah,
hot girls have some sad gal melancholy inside of them, and they're just trying to bury down their sadness.
yeah,
And so I just love that we get to see that all on display in this very, very cool film. I don't know. It
yeah,
holds up. It's a little too long, I would say, but most
yeah,
films are.
hmm
But
yeah.
it's pretty rad.
Yeah, well, with her specifically and her performance, I feel like I don't want to spoil my thoughts too much because
Oh
eventually I'll
yes.
be getting to her and the Best Actor series, so I guess I can let you take the lead a little bit more on just her performance. But I will say it's not a performance that I was thrilled about before this rewatch. I think this Best Actress lineup in particular, it's clear to me that probably if Julie Andrews hadn't won the year before, that probably she could have won for The Sound of Music. Not positive on that, but that feels right.
That
Um,
does. It's also just one of those like let me rewrite Oscar history because I do
yeah.
think like I'm not going to be on your Julie Andrews episode probably, so I'm like maybe Julie Andrews should have won because I think later in her career Julie Christie should have definitely won for something else. Like
Hmm.
she's my number one. Add a few decades to this one
Hmm.
year. And I don't know, I just it's kind of a small miracle. I feel like Julie Christie won this because it is an excellent performance. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
It I think it falls into the unlikable woman,
Mm.
like because there's different levels of that. I think there's unlikable what she's doing here, but it's not like what Rosamund Pike is doing or Glenn Close is doing,
Right.
unlikable villain.
Right.
She's just kind of a brat.
Yeah. And she gets to be a brat, which is nice. And again, doesn't feel judged for it too much, at least. Maybe other characters are sort of realizing that she's not a great person at the end of the day and they're calling her out on it, but it still is like she's still in control of her narrative the whole time. Like she is actively making these choices. They're not being forced on her.
Exactly. It's like she is driving the narrative in every regard, and all of these men are just reacting to her. And even when she's put in situations where it's just creepy men leering at her because she is a model, she is an actress,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of just like skeezy parts of the 60s portrayed in this.
Right.
She is in control of everything happening,
Hmm.
even whenever like towards the end, I guess spoilers for
Yeah.
a very old film. Like when she's married at the end, she's still in control of everything that's going on.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for her performance, I do think this definitely improved quite a bit for me on a rewatch. Maybe it's not like one of my absolute favorite Best Actress wins of all time, but she does a really good job, I think, of really towing the line
Hmm.
between really just sort of indulging in this kind of lifestyle and just loving it, but then
Hmm.
also clearly having a certain level of emptiness inside.
Hmm.
And I think maybe when people look at this performance, and some people might dismiss it a little bit as her just sort of playing this model, and maybe she doesn't really have a lot of depth. I actually do think that there's kind of just a naturalism that she brings to it. The party girl and the depressed girl, that like that blend of it, really she sort of she doesn't lean one way or the other. She kind of toes the line, like I said. And I think maybe people think that because she doesn't have these big over the top moments or these like, more quiet moments of really indulging in like the introspection of everything, I think people might dismiss it a little bit, but I see the layers that she's working with, but again, I don't want to delve too much more into it, but do you have any other sort of thoughts on just her and what she's bringing to it?
She's just a character who is always living in the moment, and when the moment is gone, it's just like, nope, it doesn't exist anymore. So
Right.
she's not going to be contemplating on everything. She's not going to have these big moments because she's just out there living and trying to be easy breezy and have fun and excitement. Like, she is a thrill seeker. She likes the danger of it. She likes the danger of affairs.
Right.
And she's always just looking for people to challenge her one way or the other. And whenever you're not giving that to her, she's gonna go. And there's a lot of subtlety in what she is portraying. But if you're really paying attention, like really pay attention to her face, you see all of the other layers of like unfulfillment and insecurity under there.
Hmm. Yeah. And I also think the narration that she has does help to bring those inner feelings to the surface because I don't know what this film feels like if we don't have that narration and we just have to sort of imagine what she's thinking. I would be
Exactly,
interested in a
because
cut of that if if they remove the narration and see what happens.
it'd be interesting because we can't trust her what she says to other people
Right.
because she is trying to manipulate to get what she wants in
Hmm.
many ways and try to provoke things out of men, but her narration is probably the most honest she will be.
Exactly. Yes, it's like a confessional, truly.
It
Um,
is.
yeah, well, maybe like a modern version of this story might not have that and might find a way to do that. But I still think that the way this film presents that narration is not jarring, you know. I'm not gonna say it's like brief encounter level of like fantastic narration.
I
But
mean, that is just
yeah,
different level. That's like
I
a
know.
different solar system of
We
perfection.
we love our Celia, yes.
We do.
But in a way, like I think the vocal performance, even in those moments, that she does give some character to that. So it's not like a flat narration sort of thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, the film does go to some really interesting places. Like, she's going off to the World Hunger Benefit, and it's basically just like an excuse for a bunch of rich people to just indulge themselves.
Yeah, it's just a lot of gambling and drinking and debauchery for
Yes,
rich people, and you get to see just, again, a good commentary on how rich people probably continue to be today.
yeah,
It's just like, oh, here's an excuse for a party. We're gonna pretend like we're doing something good for the world.
exactly. Yeah, and the cost of just throwing this party could have actually funded some real good in the world. But
Exactly.
anyway, yeah, there's the other part, like you mentioned, where she's pregnant and she has the abortion, which don't know why completely forgot about. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, just like you, I had it on in the background. I don't know, but that when that storyline came up, that was just very striking and definitely had a special resonance with everything that's going on right now in America. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it handles it pretty well. It doesn't really dwell on it too much, and again, don't think it really judges her for that choice.
And we're just only a couple years outside of the Hays Code and stuff,
Exactly.
where, like, what was it, 5 or 6 years earlier, we had to kill off Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield 8 because she was a
Yes.
bad person.
Yes. The
And
slut
so
of all
it's
time, as she says.
exactly. So it's like
Right.
just this many years later, we're able to like portray an abortion, which, like, very radical to do at all.
Thank you for listening to this preview of On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes, a Slack channel, and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.